One thing that has captured the minds and hearts of many Nigerians is the daily increasing, cost of living. Like an oxygen to a man, it is on the front burner of the discussion in homes, streets, the cars, cities, work, and even workplaces. Let's not forget, the newspaper vendor. That's where you'll see angry Nigerians lamenting about the cost of living. Also, we have the political arena where there's been, of course, we've seen a lot of back and forth, from opposition parties, from critics, from religious leaders having this discussion and then giving ideas and, call to the federal government to make a move in order to move from where we are now to a better place. Now, a visit to markets in recent times reveals that the cost of food and other household items is skyrocketing daily as the prices of cooking gas, the liquid and solid fuel, passenger transport by road, by air, and of course, it also increases on a daily basis. Also, the value of Naira continues to depreciate, even though regulatory agencies, the CBN, I mean, we've heard, I think, yesterday in the front page of the Daily Trust, where Cardoso, the CBN governor, was saying that there's been a bit of progress and they are seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. But then these bodies are saying that they're doing everything possible to stabilize the economy. Now, both salary earners and self-employed citizens are complaining that their earnings rarely meet up to their family demands, including feeding, clothing, shelter, health, and education. Life has therefore become increasingly difficult for many Nigerians, especially the low-income earners, the unemployed, and other vulnerable people. Let's not forget the small and medium business owners as well. So this morning on Daybreak, we'll be diving into the discussion of the cost of living. But then at the end of the day, we can continue pointing the problems, but we need to find possible solutions. So we will be dissecting the possible solutions, to get us out of this situation. And then we have, two amazing gentlemen to help us dissect this and, guide us and the federal government and even state government into finding possible solutions for this crisis that we're having. Now, via Zoom, virtually, we have Dr. Agoso Bamaiyi. Dr. Agoso Bamaiyi is a social entrepreneur and a development strategist, and he's joining us from Adamawa this morning. Good morning, and thank you for joining us, Doctor.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
Good to have you. All right. Also in the studio, we have Mr. Steve Nwachukwu. He is an economic and financial analyst and lead researcher at Steward Asset Management Limited. Good morning.
Good morning, and thanks once more for having me.
Of course, it's good to have you. Well, I would, let's start with Dr. Bamaiyi, via Zoom. Doctor, a lot of things are happening. We've seen religious leaders coming out to call the president and the federal government in general on exactly the cost of living that keeps increasing on a daily basis. We've seen, Trust TV made a research on even perishable goods in Lagos, and people are truly hurt and they're lamenting so bitterly. So what is your take on all of this and the call to the federal government?
Well, thank you again for having me. Let me start by saying that the cost of living is a global problem. Several countries, most countries around the world, following the lockdowns during the COVID-19 and when the country started coming out, a lot of economies started having problems, and it resulted in high cost of living. But it is that of Nigeria is peculiar. Peculiar in the sense that we are actually now reaping the results of bad decisions and wrong actions and inactions over the years that have compounded and are now fully manifesting, following the decision of this government to remove the subsidy on fuel and also to float the Naira. And so that resulted in a weaker Naira, which means that the amount of money we would normally use to buy goods, because most of our the things we use in Nigeria are imported, and that is part of the long-term problem that I talked about earlier on. We should be manufacturing these things, but we're importing them. And so the money we would need to import goods and services, previously we would pay just a little, but now we have to pay a lot, because the naira is weak all round, and then of course the cost of fuel has gone up, and this has affected everything in Nigeria. I mean, the transportation in Nigeria is about 85%, 90% done with fuel, with petroleum, and as a result, the prices of everything has gone up. Everything, school fees, feeding, all goods and services everywhere, transportation, etc., everything has gone up. And it's a very bad situation. That's why you have religious leaders, community leaders, even politicians coming out and complaining. It's not just the business people and the ordinary citizens. Everybody is feeling the pinch. And there are things that can be done about this. But again, let me emphasize that we're reaping the results of the poor decisions, wrong actions, and inactions that characterize the way we run the country for a very long time.
Indeed. All right, let's come back to the studio. Steve, let's talk about how we got here, like at this point. Nigeria used to be the most amazing, country to live in. I mean, there was a time that naira, changing to dollar was even less than 100, or let's say 120 and all that. But then now it's been way above, and there is even predictions that it will get to 2,000. That's, according to people working with the Bureau de Change. So there is that fear, and then the cost of living, the insecurity. But right now, people are not even as much bothered as insecurity as they're bothered about the cost of living, the hike in prices and everything. So how did we get here?
Okay, thank you once again for having me. First and foremost, let me progress from where the background he has laid, how we got to where we are now, the poor economic decisions of the government. How do we get out of these very situations? Government has to be very decisive. Government has to, step up and, arrest most of these very issues. Like you rightly stated, in the 70s and early 80s, dollar was at par with naira. And in 2014, 2013, it was around 170, 190, and to 200. And now we are heading to 2000 like the speculators are. So the question now is, how do Mr. President and the handlers of the economy rise up to the occasion to arrest this situation before it totally gets out of hands? The fear factor is setting in. The panic is setting in. What we now have is what we call sellers inflation. The degree and the rate at which prices are moving up by 100% in an abnormal manner. We know, yes, Naira have suffered in the last 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 years due to poor decisions that government have taken, and we have failed not to encourage backward integration program and import substitution program, at least to up local productions, and also to cut down the appetite for foreign made. These are all well established, but the critical situation we are now is for Mr. President to rise up to the occasion and declare state of emergency in our economy to arrest the fear factor, the psyche of inflation, the inflation cycle, which is driving and fueling these rising costs. There is a total arbitrary rise in prices. Cement makers wake up and push their price to whatever, and now bargaining with government. Government needs to rise to the occasion, otherwise it will totally get out of control. Have in mind that, one, if you don't do this, what it simply means that the price elasticity will occur in certain and majority of items that are inelastic products, that are inelastic goods, that even if the price gets to unbearable rates, Nigerians need it. What are these inelastic products? We have issues around the food items and the drug prescriptions that we use. Government needs to intervene in those areas and arrest the situation. captives of industries and the rest of them, government needs to step up and start having a genuine dialogue with them. This is our nation and this is our country. What can we do? Yes, we admit, yes, it is government have taken very wrong and poor economic decisions. But if we continue to run that narrative, we will sink, all of us will sink in. So government, I know for sure they are overwhelmed, but they need to brace up now and arrest the fear factor. I repeat, fear factor. Look at the speculators. Everybody now is expecting 2,000. In next 1 week, it may touch 2,000. They'll start expecting 4,000. That is the fear factor. A seller buys a goods at 100 naira, for instance, and is up to sell with a margin of 1.2 or 0.1. Mostly the supermarkets are using 1.5, 1%, or 10% to 2% to sell. Now the fear factor sets in. He buys at 10 naira and is expecting that the goods will be, next time he's buying at 150. So he goes to 200. That's the habitual.
The level of, the increment is even crazy. Today we've seen someone going today to purchase sugar and just ask, and then the next day it has increased. So this is not a case of we're buying new one. I mean, this is not a
that's the point.
Good.
That's the point I'm making. That the habitual increase is the fear factor. He buys at 10 naira. He ought to sell at 10 naira or 11 naira or 12 naira, but he jumps to 15 to 20 because he is anticipating increase. He has not gone to the distributor to buy at a new price, maybe 150 to sell at 170. He's already anticipating. So that's why I said government needs to hold the bull by the horn as we speak. Step up and arrest the fear factor. It can destroy the economy entirely. If the fear factor is happening in the cement sector, is happening in the building, is happening in the industrial, is happening in the consumer goods, we will totally collapse this nation. The fear factor, just like everybody have turned to speculators. Dollar, naira will fall to 2,000 and it's heading there. That is the fear factor I'm talking about. The psyche of inflation. Government needs to step up now and arrest the situation. Otherwise, it will get totally out of hand where you can no longer arrest. One more thing government needed also to do. As we speak, like I said, government needs to declare state of emergency in our economy. Declaring it means that it's going to give a marching order to institutions like NNPC to raise this required dollar to stabilize the exchange market. There is nothing we will talk from now till tomorrow if you don't make an adequate supply. Because what we are having is an imported inflation, sellers inflation. Government needs to be in charge. The rhetoric and propaganda needs to end.
I mean,
Nigerians are suffering.
Propaganda is something we'll definitely come back to talk about, because you've made a suggestion of a lot of things to do, but I would want to definitely steal your brain on dissecting exactly in details. But then let's hear from Dr. Bamaiyi on this matter. I mean, earlier, Steve made mention of the fact that the government, have made a lot of wrong decisions. And some experts are saying that the wrong decisions started from the previous administration, of the former CBN Governor Godwin Emefiele, making that, should I say, narrow redesign policy that started affecting it. So do you agree with that, or would you say that it started way before that and then moving on to this administration? What exactly, at what point did something just start going wrong? What mistake did the government do?
Indeed, it's a fact that the previous administration, the immediate past administration, made a lot of economic decisions that were not sound. But the problem goes way back. There was a time when we had a lot of money in Nigeria and a small population. At independence, we were around 58 million. We were making a lot of money. Instead of investing these monies to secure the future, our leaders were actually saying that the problem with Nigeria is not money, but how to spend money. And so we went into a spending spree, just buying things that we didn't need, and we were not investing. We didn't invest in our education. We didn't invest in power. We didn't invest in transportation. All those areas that would secure the economy for the future, so that when we arrive at the future, we will arrive at security, we will arrive at safety, and we will arrive at prosperity. We didn't do that. We just spent money. We allowed corruption to grow and run wild. Corruption became a wild horse, a runaway horse. And so monies that are meant for goods and for services to improve the living standards of the people were stolen, were personalized. And it got to a point where people who are in government and those who had access to government became so rich that our wealth in Nigeria was controlled by just 2% of the population. 2% of the population controlled around 85–90% of the wealth. And it made Nigeria, at a certain point, the most unequal country on earth. So much wealth, and yet you had so much poverty all over the place. So the problem goes way back beyond. And we have arrived at the future right now. We are at the future, and our population has increased. There are over 200 million, some say 230 million Nigerians, some say 240 million. It could be more than that. The population has increased, but the resources hasn't increased. And so you have this competition for resources, and you have this problem that would not be there if we had invested like Norway did, for instance. Norway started a sovereign investment fund and kept the excess money they were getting from the sales of petroleum. And that has secured Norway today. It has so much money that it has laid aside that it has no fear for any problem, whether in the immediate term or in the long term. It can take care of it. We didn't do that. And we were not wise enough to do things like that. So right now, everything is scattered. So it's a problem that goes way beyond the immediate past administration. It started long time ago.
What would you
when instead of doing
do at this point? I mean, you've looked at all the situations, the complaints of individuals, low-income earners, and even small business owners. So what would be your advice to the government at this point?
Well, things have gotten out of hand right now. And like the guest in the studio said, government has to be strong and take proactive actions, and not just sit back and keep sending to us propagandists, people who speak on behalf of the government and keep painting a rosy picture. As a matter of fact, they're insulting our intelligence. We know what is going on. We know that things are wrong. Let them stop throwing those empty figures at us. I mean, figures mean nothing when your stomach is empty. So government has to be strong and take proactive actions. This would include things like price regulation, deliberate price regulation for food items that we produce here in Nigeria. We have to, at a point, peg the prices and not allow them go beyond. Because like the studio the guest in the studio mentioned, it's people are afraid and they are speculatively increasing prices. There's no reason for it. Actually, no reason for increasing the price. You buy something in the morning, you go back in the evening, the price has gone up. So that has to be checked, And then there's hoarding going on. The same about food items. There are people who are hiding food items in warehouses. Government has to raise, team of security people and other officials to bust these warehouses and make these things available so that it will crash the prices of food items. I'm talking about food items particularly. As far as petrol is concerned, there's little that can be done in the immediate term, but we can control the prices of food. Government has to do that to make sure that the ordinary people have what to eat and they can afford what to eat. Right now, you wake up in the morning, you are not sure how the day is going to end. And if we sit back and we keep hearing these nice figures that government officials are throwing, it's going to get worse and get out of hand. It's going to get out of hand, except government takes an immediate action right now. So that's what we're calling on government to do. Now, in the immediate long term, there are several things that can be done to strengthen the Naira. We have to increase our local production here. Most of these things that we bring in, we have to stop bringing them in and encourage local people to produce these things, so the production sector, which means that we have to strengthen power.
Have that political will to push because a lot of experts, when it comes to economy and policies, have come out to advise the government to come back home for production. But then the government are not really putting any effort when it comes to, doing things at a national level, doing things to even export to other countries. There is no measures being done for that. So Nigerians are left with just, we have to import in order to survive.
Government has to be strong to do this. So there's no way around it. I mean, no country that wants to prosper and provide a good standard of living for its citizens will just be importing everything. We import everything: matches, toothpicks, cotton buds, etc., etc. Simple things that we can produce. So government has to have the political will. Let's not wait until there is a serious emergency in the hands of the government before we start doing these things. Government has to act now. So that's the only way we can strengthen our naira, so that it takes its natural place. If we produce these goods, and these goods are available and they have sufficient quality that we can export them, not only will we have enough at home to make sure that prices at home stay within control, we would also be making money. That's the way to go. Otherwise, the way the complaints that are going on right now, I went out this morning for a walk, my usual exercise walk, and as I was coming back into town, there's this motorcycle, 2 people on it, and they were discussing. They were literally shouting, and they were talking about the difficulty of the economy and comparing this administration with previous administration. The complaint is getting out of hand, and there's no telling what next the people will do. We don't have to wait to get there before we take action. Government has to be strong to take the necessary actions.
Indeed. All right, let's come back to the studio, to Mr. Nwachukwu. Now, Mr. Steve, this whole thing about price control is something that Nigerians have been echoing for the longest time. But then recently we saw the federal government in the FCT made a decision to close up a popular store, known in Abuja, the Sahad store, because of price control, that's regulation. But then when you go to social media, a lot of people are, pointing out that that particular store is one of the most cheapest store in the FCT. I mean, there are a lot, and I don't want to even call names, but there are a lot of other stores that their prices is outrageous in the FCT. And they are not sanctioning those people, but else they're sanctioning people that the people are happy with. So would you say that this political will that everybody keeps talking about is what is happening? Like, there is this fear of not stepping on particular toes, because we all know some of these businesses are owned by some political leaders, some top-notch people.
Well, as it stands now, I think whatever be the political consideration should not be what will guide government policy decisions as regards to the high cost or the racketeering prices of items in the society. Like I said earlier, the government has a mandate, and that mandate is for the security and welfare of Nigeria. That is the core mandate of a government, the welfare of the citizen. And if things are really getting out of hand because of some of your unpopular, ill-advised, ill-conceived policy decisions of government, government should find courage, just like that courage it found on that very particular day. He stood on that podium and was declaring, making a pronouncement that fuel subsidy will not be no more. Such kind of boldness, such kind of courage is demanded of our president. This is time that you need to show up. Like I said earlier, rhetorics, propaganda period is over. Otherwise, things will totally run out of. I know I'm not here like to be a prophet of doom. That's why I'm looking at the aspect of government, what can be done. Because if you continue with the speculative nature of our economic business environment, it is unfortunate that, yes, this is part of our culture, that people can arbitrarily on their own fix prices. We are just talking about 2 weeks, 1 month or 2 months ago, when one of the manufacturers of the cement industry on his own slash his price to 3,500. What has informed the new price now? Because if we are talking about sector by sector, there are a couple of these things, like in the cement sector, we have comparative advantage in the sense that the core material that is used for production of cement, which is limestone, is fine. They are almost gotten from the soil at little or no cost. So government needs to brace up now and face the situation. Now, what are the issues that government needs to tackle? Like I said earlier, declarance of emergency in economy is very important to show that, yes, I need to, arrest this situation, at least to curb this very fear factor. I'm talking about the panic. People are now hoarding. Families are hoarding food items. That's the truth. Let me say it again, government needs to raise up or brace up now and arrest this issue of fear factor. It is not the making of Nigerians. It's not also the making of these manufacturers, distributors, or retailers. It is a natural economic factor.
But
if
this
we don't
fear
arrest,
factor, don't you think it's happening globally?
No, it's not happening globally. That's where we need some level of confidence building, some level of certainty, some level of stability in the economy. That's why you have the fiscal policy decision and monetary policy decision. The work of CBN is to stabilize and have sanity in our exchange market. There is a total free fall. People are not speculating where Naira will go in the next 2 or 4 days. So that's the fear factor. So this is where you need a government. This is where you need these policy makers to say, I can now at this point peg the price exchange for dollar. This is no longer time to allow the market forces to determine, because the fear factor have set in. Let me explain what happened. I think it happened recently around January to March, when we have the Naira design. People become apprehensive. People no longer go to the bank to deposit this because government created artificial scarcity of those Naira notes because of the mopping of the old ones. So people now keep what they have. People now, ordinary people who don't buy a bag of rice is hustling to look for a bag of rice. You are creating artificial demand. People who ordinarily buy 1 sachet of this and 2 sachets is looking for a quantity to buy. So you are creating that fear factor. It's creating artificial demand in the market. They keep what they will not consume in the next 6 months, in the next 1 year. So that's why I say government needs to step in and stabilize the psyche, inflationary psyche of Nigerians, that yes, if I go to that store, in the next 1 month, the price will not change. That is the fear factor I'm talking. But people now, because they are afraid that this product, this item will rise in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 hours, they are buying in quantity more than what they needed. That's what you see sometimes when you have these queues in their petrol filling station. One can literally have a 10 liters and comfortably go where he wants to go because he knows that in the next filling station I will get it. But when there is this sign or this panic of scarcity, you want to fill your tank.
There will be panic buying.
There will be panic. That's exactly. If it enters into the entire business ecosystem, it will destroy the economy because people will be running after products, and the capacity of some of these manufacturers and importers also to have abundance of this item, it will create the real scarcity of these products in the market because people now hoard or buy more than what they needed. That's why I said government needs to step in and make sure that the monetary policy aspect of it, you stabilize the strength and buying power of Naira. You can peg at this point. This is no longer time to say an absolute flotation. If you continue that, there is an excess Naira that can chase after whatever you have there in your forest market. So peg it and make sure that you did a sincere and transparent allocation to those who actually need it. That's an angle to it. Then you have to increase your supply. Whatever you need to do now, increase the supply, because the scarcity is what is creating this arbitrary rise in prices. A manufacturer who needs one raw material, an importer who is importing one finished goods, is thinking that if I don't buy now, the price gets to 2,000, definitely my price will go up. So they are all trying to mop up what is available in the forest market. peg it and make an adequate supply that will tame down the rising demand for forests as we speak now. People are looking for raw material even for the next 2 years. They want to abundantly stockpile their raw materials because they don't know what the naira. So that sanity or stability of our exchange market needs to maintain. Like I said, government needs to brace up now, find dollar at any cost and supply to the system to reduce this cycle of scarcity. Then on the aspect of the supply angle too, there should be a strong matching order to NNPC.
Do you think that can be done?
Strong, yes, of course. The government needs to weigh in now. What is going on? We are still underproducing around 1.4 or 1.45 million barrels per day. What can we do? You seek these guys on the table and ask, as a president of Nigeria, as a CEO of Nigeria, what can you do to raise the production to 2 million for me in the next couple of days or weeks? What is happening with those who are licensed with our OMLs? What is going on around the oil theft? You brace up, otherwise things will fall out of hand. Raise this forest that you need through the open up your production of crude oil to somewhere 1.92 million. We at least give some level of stability in our exchange market. Then you deal with the issue of demand curve, which is a medium and long time. Nobody is going to cut the appetite tomorrow. The appetite for foreign made product. You have to aggressively deploy the tools you have to encourage local production, to encourage consumption of made in Nigeria. These are a long and medium term measure. They are not immediate. The immediate is to give matching order to NNPC to make sure you ramp up production to somewhere above 1.9 million barrels per day so that you can have a sufficient dollar to arrest and tackle this crazy demand. If you allow this speculative nature that is going on, it will get to a point that it hit 2,000, they're expecting 3,000. People will be buying against 3,000. That is the danger of speculation. That is the danger of fear factor. And that psyche is setting in. Government needs to brace up and nip this thing on the board now. I know what is going to happen in the next 6 months if things are not done. Look at us on the way to Venezuela. This is where he's heading to. The anticipation of price rising is enough. Even the boss are meeting. The boss of management of most of industrialists are meeting. They are looking at these things until you give that level of stability in their psyche that in the next 2 months price will not go up. I don't need to mop up available forests in the market. Like I said earlier, government needs to be deliberate in supply of forests to the market. Matching order needs to be given to NNPC. The era of oil theft, 300,000 barrels, 250,000 barrels being stolen by a cabal needs to end as we speak. That is the only way to arrest the situation. Otherwise, just like you are seeing the protests springing up everywhere, as the price continues to go up, it will get to a point that government will be totally overwhelmed and they cannot do anything about it. So government needs to step up now. Business as usual at end. Those cabals you know that are involved in oil theft, make sure you stop them. Stop them now and up production at least to 2 million barrels. That would give us a sufficient dollar to attack and arrest this situation.
I mean, at this point, you know, the economic saboteurs are really getting on the nerve of every Nigerian, and it's really disappointing that you don't have any patriotic bone in your mind, you know, to push for your country to be in a better place, but rather you want to contribute to sabotaging it. But then I want to hear this, Dr. Bamaiyi. Let's talk about the long-term economic implication of this high cost of living. If it should continue, you know, without government doing the needful, just like Steve here advised, what would be the implication in the long term?
Well, the implications are better, you know, imagined than one would not wish that we get there. You know, we will have a runaway economy, and that will result in everything collapsing, including security. It will result in serious security problems that the government might not be able to handle. We don't want to get there. And that's why we are talking the way we are talking now. The government needs to stand up and take the necessary action. There is no future for Nigeria if we allow these things to go on like this. We have to control these things and bring back some level of sanity, And I would also want to add to this by saying that Nigerians we need to help the government too. I mean, most of the work has to be done by the government, but we have roles to play, like consuming made in Nigeria goods, going deliberately for homemade goods, which would reduce the need to take our naira outside and get dollar so we can bring in goods and services.
But
We have to show our patriotism
on that
as far as
I
that is
want to
concerned.
ask, how can Nigerians take to, consuming homemade goods when we do not have homemade goods? I mean, that is a question. We don't have it. So how can they stick to that?
Yeah, we can start with food items. We have what we need to eat, whether it's local rice, the vegetables, fruits, etc., etc. We can start with that.
Okay, doctor.
I know people, some of my friends who do not consume local rice.
Talking about food, one thing that you and I would definitely agree on is that Nigerians are lovers of agriculture. I mean, we see how the north and the east go to farms, but we're talking about both the male and the female. They love farming, but then the insecurity now is affecting them. So again, I would ask, how can Nigerians stick to consuming locally produced food when they don't have the security, to go to their farms and farm?
I understand what you're saying. And the people who do the farming are mostly under situations that they cannot go to their farms now. There are lots of farmers who are sitting at home because of insecurity. You go to your farm, you stand the risk of being abducted or killed, and this has affected the local production. And that's why locally produced food items are not enough in the market. They are not in the market in sufficient quantity. And so people are easily turning to imported food items. But again, I have suggested, and I would want to suggest again, and it still comes back to government, like we said earlier, in terms of dealing with insecurity, because these things are connected. If we do not provide the security for farmers to produce the food, then the food will not be produced. It's a vicious cycle, really, and it's very tight. But again, coming back to what I said earlier, when I mentioned about Nigerians patronizing Nigerian goods, there are lots of things that we can do as a start. It will not be easy, but for instance, I mentioned earlier some of my friends who prefer foreign rice. They tell you that local rice is full of sand and all that, despite the fact that the stoning machines are available and the rest of it. What I'm saying is that if we do not patronize the local ones, they are not going to have sufficient money to mechanize and improve the quality of their production. And as a result, we will perpetually be producing goods that cannot compete with foreign goods because our local producers do not have sufficient money to put in the machinery that is necessary to standardize and give sufficient quality to the things they produce. So there has to be a period of sacrifice, a period where we'll endure the little hardship as we strengthen our economy by promoting local production through local consumption. That has to be done. And I'm talking on the side of the citizens. But again, everything that has been said by Steve still applies. The government has to be strong. It has to take action. On the other side, we, the ordinary citizens, have to show patriotism by patronizing the few local goods that we produce so we can strengthen the producers and they can give us international quality.
So as a social entrepreneur, Doctor, I want to ask you, what would be your advice, to the citizens trying to cope through all of this hardship?
We should show a lot of self-control. It's easy. They say a hungry man is an angry man. There's a lot of anger in the land, and we're not just saying it. We're not trying to sound sensational. As a matter of fact, I'm controlling myself right now and not saying some of the things that are being said out there. It's a lot worse than people in government are thinking. So my call to the ordinary citizens is show a lot of restraint, show a lot of self-control. You can make your point without resorting to hate speech. Let's stop blaming one section of the country. I hear people say when we were in power, it wasn't like this. It's the people from that side of the country. It's not. The problem the government is faced with right now is a cumulative problem. We all contributed to it. All the previous administrations contributed to it. So let's stop blaming a particular administration and see what we can do. And to people in government, I would say this. The Nigerians are very smart people. We're one of the smartest human capital in the world. If we're given the environment and the right incentive, Nigerians can produce everything that we need. And when I say everything, I mean everything. But the power is not there. Transportation is not good and all that. So you make effort, you produce things here. You have to sell it more expensive than imported goods if you are to make profit from what you have done. Again, it comes back to government. Produce a conducive environment, and Nigerians are up to the task to do the things that are necessary to have our economy buoyant. Nigerians can do that. We're one of the finest human capital in the whole world, but the environment is not there. Providing the conducive environment is up to the government. So we throw the ball back in the court of the government. Do what is necessary, control this situation so it does not get out of hand, produce a conducive atmosphere for us to produce, and we will produce and move our country to prosperity.
I mean, you've said it all at this point, Dr. Agoso Bamaiyi. So, we'll just let you go here. Thank you so much for your time, for your input. I mean, it's been a very, very, interesting discussion with you. Thank you so much, Dr. Agoso Bamaiyi, that joined us virtually from Adamawa, and he is a social entrepreneur and development strategist. Appreciate your time with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right, let's come back to the studio. Now, Steve, before I let you go, you made mention of, state of emergency. We saw how the president, called a state of emergency on security matters, and even though some people would say maybe there've been a little bit of reduction of, insecurity, but then other people would definitely tell you that they have not felt the impact of that state of emergency that was been called by the president. So how do you think him calling a state of emergency on the cost of living, the economic matters, would change the situation?
Well, I think one thing is to declare the state of emergency. Another thing is to take measures, actionable measures to tackle the issues. You can barely declare a state of emergency while you are not putting at both the kinetic and non-kinetic approaches to arrest security issues that we have. Just like I said, declaring a state of emergency in the entire overall economy is quite important. And this is the best he can do for us now, and then leave to some actionable measures. Like as we speak now, I should be seeing the Minister of Agriculture and the counterpart from the states, having meetings, bringing a hectares of lands that they will, move into mass cultivation of most of these crop items across the federations. And I need to start seeing government sourcing for improved seed to give on either a subsidized rate or free to artisanal farmers and industrial farmers. I need to start seeing government officials like the Minister of Agriculture and the rest of them within the fiscal policy sitting down with captains of industry, those in our processing food chains, like the ulams, like the flour mills, like the honey wells. Name it. We have a lot of this industrial that has some level of capacity. I think around 100 and 180,000 metric tons we have capacity, combined capacity of ulam, flour mill, Nestle, Honeywell, and name them that are in processing food. How can we help you? How can we assist you at this point to at least moderate the prices and also cultivate these very items in the large scale? So these are the kind of actionable measures that government needs to be taking. Then, and like I said, the crux of the matter beyond all these measures, because all of them needs to go concurrently, is to take this decision around the around the oil turf. Like I said, marching order to NNPC, if it takes sacking all the top managements who perhaps are involved or know one thing or the other that is going on in that sector, government needs to step up on that angle and make sure that NNPC account for the proceeds of our sales of crude and also improve or ramp up production of this production. So these are what government needs to. These are short-term measures. Like I said, not just the declaration, releasing of grains, about 102 metric tons, that will solve it. No. What will solve it is to take the drastic measures to bring some level of sanity in our market. If you can give that certainty and hope to consumers and retailers and manufacturers, nobody will be running around and be looking for dollar everywhere and shooting the price up. When you have already raw material to produce for the next month, you are sourcing for dollar for the next 10 months. That is the panic that government needs to arrest. Make adequate supply of forest to the market. Nothing stops government too, going back to the drawing board. All this started on this very evil twin policy of removal of subsidy and the flotation policy.
Now, the removal of subsidy, Steve, I want to ask.
Let me make this point. Okay. Nothing stops the government also to revisit this very issue. Nothing stops that boldness he had at that podium that day. Let him have that boldness also to say, well, I have felt the pains of my people. Well, IMF, the World Bank, and the Bretton Woods, and the rest of them have advised me. I think at this point, I need to apply some level of caution in implementation. What can I do to at least reduce these pains? I like the posture of the government, but that's not good enough to say, well, price of petroleum product or price of PMS in particular will not go up. I listened to the spokesman of the Villa, the spokesman of the presidency recently said that they will moderate and make sure that the price of PMS doesn't go up. And that's why some accusations are coming from all quarters now that you are actually indirectly paying subsidy. We need to stabilize. That's the stabilization I'm talking about. You don't leave everything to the market forces. When you do that, things will fall out of hands. And that is the situation we don't want to get to. So let me allow you so that you answer that question.
You were making point from the questions that I wanted to move on, and that is the subsidy. I mean, we all agree. I mean, experts are saying yes, it's a good measure, implementing that, withdrawing the subsidy. But then the World Bank are even calling on the federal government to stop even the alleged partial one that they're paying. So now that question is where it lies in. Was it a wrong decision, to remove the subsidy in the first place?
Yes, I would say it's not an absolute yes question answer, in the sense that yes, some level of removal needed to occur, but it's the manner and way of application of removal, implementation of the removal. Like I suggested when this declaration was done, Mr. President, our economy is not strong, fundamentally rich enough to absorb whatever shock that will come from the 100% removal. Please apply some phaser, 20%, 30%, 40% removal till a point there is no subsidy anymore. So those who are calling or advising the president is just because of the exposure of the past administration have, enrolled Nigeria in our debts. Our debt ratio, debt service to ratio is around 94 or 95%. So the government, we are listening to them because you owe hugely, and there's no way you can pay if you don't take away subsidies, and so that you can raise money to actually repay most of these loans. So that was on that grounds that government were quick to, accept all their advice, not considering the fact that economies are peculiar. Most of these advices are good, but the question is the peculiarity of the environment we are applying most of these policy decisions. So Nigeria, like I said, wasn't good or strong enough economy to absorb the
same time.
100% removal of fuel subsidy. So that was why it was wrong. Then on the flotation, the issues around flotation was inadequate supply of forex. You couldn't allow the force of demand and supply or forces of the market to determine your rate. You should have managed it. Frequency, as in the number of interventions should be frequent. Don't allow an arbitrary jumping from 900 to 1,000 for what's reckless on the side of government. That's why you see importers, you see manufacturers also being reckless in their pricing of their goods and services to the people.
So at the end of the day, it all comes back to, you know, regulating everything. I mean, making sure the government has its hand and not allow the market forces to make decisions, both in terms of forex and in commodities. Well, I mean, because of time, because this is things that you and I know is really eating Nigerians deep. I mean, well, we can continue this conversation for the longest time, but let's just put a stop to it now. Thank you so much, Mr. Steve Nwachukwu, for joining us today to dissect, you know, this high cost of living affecting the country. Appreciate your time.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
And that was Mr. Steve Nwachukwu. He is an economist and financial analyst. And with that, of course, we have come to the end of this segment, you know, where we dissected a lot of issues affecting the country. And we hope that the federal government, state government, local government, let's not forget about them. You know, we need to hold every arm of the government, you know, accountable for their decisions. So we hope that this message reached them, you know, advices from experts, and find our way out of this huddle, you know, or hole that we are in.